Hi lads, this is a continuation now of yesterday's lesson. We were looking at our blood. We had started off looking here at the red blood cells. So the red blood cells, as you know from yesterday, are involved in carrying oxygen around the body. There are, of course, millions of them inside in our blood. They're actually what give our blood its red color, and this is because there is this pigment. We say a pigment is something that gives something color, and it's called hemoglobin. Um, so the red blood cell, of course, is really important. It's transporting oxygen around our body to all of the cells of our body. And remember, 100 trillion cells in our body need oxygen all the time. So these little red blood cells are vital. So they have the special shape, as we said yesterday, and the special biconcave shape is there. It's biconcave because there's two sides to the red blood cell, and it's concave because it's going in the middle to carry more oxygen. It's designed that way. So that is the first type of red blood cell. Now this is where what we wanted to look at next. This is the white blood cell. The white blood cell is a cell that's involved in fighting infection. And right now, this is what's really important in our body. The white blood cell, it fights infection in two ways. It fights them either directly by gobbling them up. Okay, so by gobbling up bacteria or cells that have been infected by viruses, it can attack them and effectively eat them. Okay, there's a little video here that you might be interested in having a look at. This is an actual white blood cell that is hunting down bacteria in a person's body. Uh, this is being seen underneath a microscope. The second way that white blood cells attack bacteria or viruses is they use something called antibodies. And antibodies are when you have had the flu, you will have developed your own antibodies to fight against the flu that you have been suffering with. So I'm sure we all know, like usually if we get sick, we might get a head cold, and a head cold generally would be where we have a bacterial infection. Okay, and it might mean that you have a sore throat, whereas um, a viral infection like the flu, usually they're a little bit more severe and it takes longer to get over something like the flu. It might take 2 weeks. And the reason it takes 2 weeks is because your body is developing these antibodies, because really there is no cure for viruses like the flu unless maybe you have received a vaccine. So this year lots of people were getting the vaccine for the flu because they didn't want to get it when we know that there's another very bad virus going around, which is COVID. So what this does is it basically a vaccine teaches your body to develop antibodies. And antibodies are what you need to defeat viruses. They're chemicals that deactivate the virus and stop it from working and actually kill it. So what do I want you to know about this? I just want you to know that both basically white blood cells are involved in fighting infections. They either eat up bacteria or viruses, or they beat them with antibodies. So one thing I have failed to mention so far actually is that both the red blood cells and the white blood cells are both they're both found here in the bone marrow of our bones. So I'm sure if you've ever eaten meat before, you probably had a bone of some description that might have been in your meal, and if you cracked it open, you would see this kind of tissue in the middle of the bone. This is what we call the bone marrow, and the bone marrow is where we find the white blood cells and the red blood cells being made. That's where they're born. Okay. Finally, then we have the third type of cell we can find inside the body, and these are what we call platelets. Platelets are they are something that causes clots in the body. So if you've ever had a cut, and I'm sure you've all had a cut at some stage or a wound, then you know that you bleed from the wound, and that bleeding doesn't continue forever. What happens is you get a scab, and the scab will cover the skin, protecting it. This scab is made of platelets, and platelets are tiny little cells that basically rush to the site of infection to stop the blood from flowing outwards and to stop things like bacteria from getting in. So anytime you get a wound or a cut in the air around you, you have bacteria and viruses, and those bacteria and viruses are trying to get into your body. So it's really important that you close that wound as soon as possible. And this is why often you have people that um, like you might want to put some sort of an elastoplast or whatever over the wound to help prevent any further infection. The scab, though, mostly will do the work. So, if the bacteria or viruses get into your body, well, then along come your white blood cells to basically kill anything that has entered that shouldn't be there. And these white blood cells, that's why sometimes when you get a wound, your skin actually swells up. Okay, so that is your three different types of blood cells that you found in the body. We have red blood cells, white blood cells, and platelets. They're the three. Okay, so red blood cells, just to recap, they carry oxygen. White blood cells are fighting infection, and the platelets are clotting the blood, basically making a scab. So, how do all of these different body systems interact? So, we're talking about the circulatory system and the other ones. Well, I'm sure you have an idea already about this, but first of all, maybe we'll talk about what a system is. So, remember a system when we covered this in the chapter on cell structure. We said a system is a group of different organs that work together. So, in our circulatory system, what organs are working together? Well, the heart is working together with all of the different blood vessels. So, um, in front of me, I have a few different things. I have a breathing system, the digestive system, the urinary system. Well, how does the blood interact with all of those different things? Well, we will be looking at a few of these at a later date, but for now, you should know that the breathing system interacts with the blood because the blood flows around the lungs, and what carries into the blood from the lungs only things like oxygen. Things like oxygen. And what carries um, into the so oxygen goes into the blood, carbon dioxide goes into the lungs, and is exhaled then out through the mouth. The digestive system interacts with the blood because the food it comes out of the small intestine, and we know that that goes into the blood. Remember, we said that that is carried around to each of the cells. Then each cell requires food. And finally, then we have the urinary system, and the urinary system's involved has interacted with the blood because, well, it takes the blood carries the urea, which comes from the cells, and it carries it down to the kidneys to turn it into something called urine. And I'm sure you're all familiar with that. So, how do the systems interact overall? Well, really, the circulatory system is a transport network for all of those different systems. It transports oxygen around the body, it transports food around the body, and it transports something called urea, urea, which is going to turn into urine, and then we're going to excrete it when we go to the bathroom. So there we have a few different things for you to read about there, and what moves into the blood and what moves out of the blood, and you can read that in your own time by pausing the video. So what objectives should you be able to achieve so far? In other words, in testing your knowledge. And this will be part of your homework. You'll get two pieces of homework on this. I want you to, in your small copy, write down the functions of blood cells. So identify the functions of the blood cells. So in other words, you have to name it for red blood cells, white blood cells, platelets. What is the function of each of the different cells? I want you to identify the functions of the blood. So what does the blood do overall? What is its functions? What's it do? And finally, I want you to name two examples of how the body systems interact. So you could pick out two examples. You could say, okay, I'm going to look at the breathing system today and compare that with the circulatory system, or I'm going to look at the digestive system and compare that to the circulatory system. How do those two systems interact? The second piece of work you're going to do for me is you're going to take down a few notes, and that'll be posted in the Google Classroom. Okay, so we'll talk to you at a later stage.